Hello and welcome to Stone Upon Stone, Episode 13, Terms and Conditions Apply. Last time I talked about AI, or large language models, and how their use in creative works inhibits our finding peace. This week I'd like to talk a little bit about software licenses, and about how common sense interpretations applied whenever contract terms come into question would improve the peace of our society. I decided to make this a topic in my series after watching the film The Portable Door, a production of the Jim Henson Company and Storybridge Films. It is hardly a spoiler to say that this film features themes about terms of use. The first scene of the film is a list of them. But the story got me thinking about how we can improve the abusive way in which many companies use terms of service and privacy policies that are too long and dense for anyone to actually read to gain access to data and control that the services or products that they provide have no legitimate need to touch. I have compiled a short list of principles that should guide decisions about whether terms of service should be enforceable and whether agreeing to those terms should constitute actual consent. I realize that on the face of it, people should read what they are agreeing to and be bound by it. But with almost every set of terms of service, including a clause allowing the company providing the service to rewrite them after their users have invested time and trust in these programs, such that a TOS that was marginally acceptable when we first see it can become something wholly unacceptable without a true opportunity to remove the user's data and participation. Something beyond the letter of the contract really needs to be in place to prevent the abuses we are already seeing. Without further delay, here are some of the principles that should be applied by lawyers, judges, magistrates, and arbiters when complaints, suits, or other disputes about contract terms and terms of service agreements come to their hands for arbitration. The first of these is the law of equal exchange. In order to require something from the customer, the company needs to provide something of equal and related value. In order to require something from the customer, the company needs to provide something of equal and related value. The only exception is money. If someone willingly agrees to pay a specified and openly visible amount for anything, regardless of its market value, and the company provides what was advertised for that price, that is equal exchange. But let's look at some other things. Letting someone charge your payment method the amount shown on the screen when you choose to buy an in-game item or currency is equal exchange. Letting someone have access to your phone's text conversations in exchange for making a sound at a chosen time is not equal exchange. The value of the notification is trivial compared to the value of the contents of your conversations. Letting someone use your intellectual property royalty-free in perpetuity with the right to assign rights to third parties without your approval or compensation is not equal to the value of promoting your work on their website for a limited time. That is not equal exchange. Letting a program access resources it needs to do its stated purpose, such as a microphone access for a dictation program, is equal exchange, while requiring a program that displays a quote of the day to have access to the microphone is not. And that brings me to reasonable inclusion. Reasonable inclusion is an expectation that the required permission or intrusion is an expected part of the service being rendered. An app that does augmented reality could reasonably be expected to need to use your camera to show some imaginary or metaphysical thing such as address text on the background of your surroundings. Software that compresses your files to save space can reasonably be expected to need access to those files and to the space where it can store the compressed version. It is not reasonable to expect that a game storing its own files would need access to your conversation history or to all of your files. So, if you have something that's not a reasonable inclusion, let's talk about a first page warning. The first page warning is a principle that a summary of unexpected inclusions should be shown up front. Someone should not have to read carefully and look at every heading to be made aware that you've put something in the contract that they might object to, or more likely, that you know they'd object to. Anything that violates a reasonable expectation of relevance needs to be pointed out on the first page of the TOS. That way, people can see, okay, this is something I wouldn't expect, and they would be aware of it right up front. Then they would have no excuse for not understanding that you had included it. Everything should have a reasonable expectation of relevance. But what is a reasonable expectation of relevance? In order to qualify for the first page warning, it needs to not be a reasonable expectation. So what is that reasonable expectation of relevance? Would a reasonable person consider this clause relevant to the performance of the service provided by the software or service? People do have an expectation of privacy. Another area where TOS conditions often fail to be equitable is this expectation of privacy. People have a reasonable expectation of privacy. Companies can deny it all they like, but just as a person has a right to the control of the use of their likeness, they also have the right to decide which pieces of data to share, and not just by sneaking permissions into something that shouldn't have had anything to do with their personal data. You may think that judges don't have the power to bring about this kind of change, but we already have precedent for putting limits on what contracts can force. Courts have ruled contracts unenforceable for inability of one or both parties to understand what they're agreeing to, which is called lack of capacity, for duress, where one party coerces agreement through holding the other party's ability to meet obligations hostage, for undue influence, for misrepresentation, and I think we can all agree that many companies are misrepresenting what their software does, for non-disclosure. Again, we can agree that many companies are hiding what their software is doing, for including clauses that represent grossly unequal bargaining power, highly unfair terms, or things that are done in a way that one party had difficulty understanding what they agreed to, and this is called unconscionability. We see a lot of this. Highly unfair terms includes things that you would not normally agree to, like giving access to all of your photos and the ability to publish them on somebody else's website in exchange for telling you what time it is, or notifying you when a certain time has come. Other reasons that courts have ruled contracts unenforceable are impossibility or mistake, where someone made a mistake in the agreement, or one or both parties has no way of fulfilling the terms, and for public policy, where the terms of the contract represent something that poses harm to society as a whole. So I think it's well within precedent for courts and arbiters to start throwing out these unreasonable and antisocial terms of service practices and cause enough pain to encourage companies to limit their TOS to things they actually need to have in order to A, provide the service claimed, and B, protect themselves from frivolous or unreasonable liability. Really, the best thing I think we can do is to come up with a boilerplate, an equitable contract that could be referenced by a tiny terms of service that covers the basics of protecting both parties, and that doesn't have to be read over and over and over again each time you get a piece of software or start a service. You could just refer to that document and in the terms of service, and people would already understand, okay, these common sense things are in this document. That way everybody would be on a level playing field when they talk about the terms of service, and you could see what the exceptions are without having to dig through thousands of pages. Because they do that on purpose. They make these contracts, these terms of service, excessively long just so people won't look at them. It could be something like the GPL, perhaps. A basic software license used to be pretty simple. You use this software at your own risk, so you can't sue us if it doesn't work the way you expect. If we promised it would work a certain way and be reliable for certain things, you have to use it the way we specified, because that's how we designed it to run. And we can't be responsible for what happens when you run it in a way that we didn't design for. In return for your agreement not to sue us, we agree not to abuse your data. We'll keep our hands off what's not needed to do what this program does, and when we do collect data, we'll protect it like it was our own secrets. Wouldn't society be so much better if companies and software developers couldn't use contract law to scam people out of their privacy and security? Wouldn't that be a huge step toward peace? Join me next time when I'll discuss the game world where I play while I'm talking about these topics, and after that, I'll talk about lies we tell each other. Are you enjoying these videos? Would you like to see more works I produce? I am receiving support from my Patreon campaign, and you can join in the fun and help pay for more content like this. My patrons have access to all the videos in this series, to early access to some content, and to behind-the-scenes posts relating to my serial novel projects. Right now is a great time to visit my page and pledge your support for my art and social commentary. All of my work is produced without artificial creativity. I write my own stories and scripts and make all reasonable efforts to avoid AI tools. For as little as $12 a year, you can support the creation of more high-quality stories and videos. Special thanks goes out to Chris Howard for supporting my works.